all the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist? You're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs? Fuck you. War.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. I'm VANDERSTEEL and welcome to the War Zone. This is Steel News. It is 1 o'clock. It's been a hot minute since I've been with all of you, but man, we have got a freaking barn burner today. All of the talk about the scumbaggery that we, the American people, have unwittingly and unknowingly, and certainly against our will, now that we know, been funding around the world. I remember in 2017 calling out these scumbags saying, we're going to find out that 85% of the world's leadership is involved in some form or another in child sex trafficking and pedophilia. And then wouldn't you know, I got the holy hell from David Brock over at Media Matters and his lover, James Alefantis at Comet Pizza. Yep, Pizzagate's real. All this crap is real. This disgusting debauchery that we call the United States government. This is why that corporation is going down. I have been screaming about this for years now. We're going to dismantle that corporation. We're going to stand up the republic. And it's because people like you are getting out in the field and getting all this. Joining me today, this is going to be an explosive interview. So take a minute right now, stop whatever you're doing, pick up that cell phone, or if you're on your computer, or if you're watching this on TV, please grab something and share it. Get on your cell phone, get on your emails, start to share these links out and tell people to get in here because we are on Twitch, we're on X, we're on 2 Rumble channels. We're on Spreely, we're on Facebook, we're Getter, we're on Cloud Hub, we're all over the place. We want to make sure this gets out everywhere because you need to know just exactly what these dirtbags that are supposedly our representatives have been up to. They have been literally living large and on largesse on our sweat equity, the money that we've been paying in taxes, the money that Federal Reserve, that criminal outfit of international bankers has been printing into an oblivion. Trillions and trillions and quadrillions of dollars have been printed. Thank you. We've been paying the interest on it. And that's why we're in debt, because there's no way in hell you're ever going to get out from underneath that charge card. Not until we shut it all down. And President Trump shutting down USAID took a very, very big step and a massive bite out of all their backsides, their wallets, and of course, their little sex predilections. So anyhow, today, Ryan Matta, incredible documentary filmmaker. He has been all over the place, South America, Central America, down on the border, up in Chicago. He just put out a couple of incredible movies about treason and trafficking. Fortunately, I had the opportunity to be in one of them. He's absolutely spectacular. But we're going to be looking into just how corrupt the U.S. government really is. How far-reaching is this actual sphere of influence peddling and money laundering go? What kind of debauchery is actually being funded by the American taxpayer? Ryan just returned from Guatemala, and let me tell you something. Just the little bit that I heard before we're going live on this show is enough to make my just blood boil and skin just creep out to the max. But you're going to get to go along for this ride with me because he has made some very startling discoveries of the graft, sick predilections, and money laundering around USAID using one of Barack Obama's ambassadors. And there's more. There's always so much more. But we got him home safely stateside, and we had to wait till he got out to bring this report to you. But just so you know, this dirtbag, Todd Robinson, who was the U.S. ambassador on behalf of the United States in Guatemala from September of 2014 till September of 2017, took advantage of his position to engage in some very, very shady and yet lucrative opportunities. This man probably is really more of a CIA, State Department, USA point man for all their black operations. And of course, probably some color revolutions. Well, we're going to get into that with Ryan. Joining me now is Ryan Matta. It is great to have you here, Ryan. Thank you so much for popping in and bringing us this explosive story. Lay it out, man.
And I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for bringing me on. And, you know, I feel like I got to keep telling these stories to keep myself alive because you sit on this kind of evidence and it gets you killed, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, we can just go into it, or you want me to just jump right into it? You kind of
just jump into it. I want, first of all, tell us what led you to Guatemala, because you've done a lot of reporting on the border. You got very involved in child trafficking. You put out a movie, Trafficked, about child trafficking and how massive that is. But I think one thing sort of led to another. So I want to know how you ended up going to Guatemala to, basically uncover this massive, disgusting story that you're about to lay out for us. But what brought you there?
Well, honestly, it all starts with you, Ann. Remember back when, gosh, was that 2022? Well over 2 years ago now, we were down in Texas, and I had met you for the first time because you guys were getting ready to go drive the entire border. You had actually rented an SUV, like a little minivan mobile home type.
We also had the big, we call it the Palace. It was the Winnebago.
Yeah, the Winnebago. That was it. Yeah. So you were in the Winnebago, and I had brought that story to you and Michael Yon about those government-funded child trafficking networks that were operating down there in Texas. And that was like the first story I've ever broke. I wasn't a reporter. I had no idea. So I was trusting you guys, and you guys kind of showed me the way. And that kind of led me to coming back. I mean, I remember being in Texas on your show when I was in Arizona that one day, and you brought me on, and I was outside that Southwest Keep facility. And I'm like, our politicians, and nobody's listening. So over like a 2-year period of just basically screaming at the wind and nobody listening. And every time you try to tell somebody that our government's running the largest child trafficking network and you try to get into it, they're looking at you like you're crazy, So I was like, it got to a point where I was left with no other option but to make a documentary. So me and JJ went on a mission to make actually just a treason documentary, because I knew I've been doing the child trafficking long enough that it had to be its own documentary. And I was like, JJ's wanted to laser focus on the treason and wanted to go to each hub of the immigration where these migrants were getting dropped off at, where they were coming in at, and focus on, can we prove that this is treason? And in the process, we interviewed Carlos. Then I was like, okay, you can't interview Carlos and not interview Deb and Tara and Aaron and all the other key players that have been fighting on the front lines to expose this government-funded child trafficking operation. So we released Traffic with JJ. And I thought that, the film, in my personal opinion, a lot of people that watched it was like their favorite and best film that they've ever seen as far as the documentary goes. But because we put it behind a paywall, it had little to no impact. So then I just was scratching my head. I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go. I'm just going to take the money out of my own pocket. I'm going to fund one more. And I'm just going to put it with the donation link. Because a lot of people in the comments are like, why don't you give this away for free? Why don't you give this away for free? Well, it costs money to make these things, like $25,000 at least. And when you're doing it with a partner and you're trying to coordinate flights coming in and out of the place at the same time, and you got to buy the more expensive flight, you got to get an Airbnb for an extra day because the guy can't get out. All those things come into play. So those ones cost us about $100,000 to make. And I was able to make these by myself for $25,000. So I went on a mission to just make one more called Operation Amber Alert. That was the one that we released in November 25th of 2024. So about 3 months ago. And then I had it translated into Spanish. Within 24 hours of having it translated into Spanish, I was contacted by the Attorney General of Guatemala. And she wanted to know if I wanted to come down there and talk to her team about the major child kidnapping epidemic that was taking place in Guatemala. And little did I know at the time, I had an idea, because we always were saying that, like, out of that big number, the 300,000, or by October of 2024, it was 452,121 migrant children have arrived at our border without parents. These are children ages 0 to 17 that are being trafficked into America from 180 different nations. Now, I never stopped to really hone in on where exactly these children were going. I knew that a majority of them were coming from 3 or 4 countries: Guatemala, Ecuador, Honduras, and El Salvador. But I didn't know how serious it was until the Attorney General contacted me. I go, I'm going to figure out the exact numbers of how many are coming from Guatemala or came from Guatemala. And I was shocked, and it was 42 to 48% year over year, making the total number 190,052 have been kidnapped out of one country, Guatemala, with a population size of 15 million. So to put that into context, that's their child population is only 7 million. So over 3% of their child population has been kidnapped in the last 4 years under the Biden regime and trafficked into America, where our government has taken possession of these children and now can't find over 75% of them.
Yeah. Well, can't find or doesn't want to reveal what exactly happened to them or is currently happening to them. We're going to get to that, because we are going to get to that, because that's the part that people just can't stomach. But you know what? I'm tired of them. They can't handle it. You know that movie, Few Good Men, They Can't Handle the Truth? Well, they're going to have to learn how to handle the truth, because it's really it's so bad. And, Liz Crokin, God bless her, that woman was on it from 2015 on, calling this stuff out. And look at what they did to her. Look at what they did to her. And when I started calling it out, and I didn't even know who she was, hadn't even met her, they started doing the same thing to me. And I have been, sidelined. I've even lost Rumble accounts. I mean, that's how bad this subject is. They just don't want it out there. They really don't want it out there. So, okay, so this leads you to Guatemala. You focused in on one particular individual and the USAID debauchery, but I want to know, what was it? Who was it? How did you end up down there and sort of get into this particular vein? Because this is so explosive, what you're about to reveal.
So this particular vein comes from my new documentary, which is Operation Amber Alert Guatemala. After I went down there the first time, I didn't have the information that I'm bringing you today. That came when I literally just went back there. I was actually planning to release my documentary on the 2nd, but the editor, he couldn't get it done in time. So that's why I ended up releasing today. But I went down there, I was going to release the film, and I had a bunch of whistleblowers that have came forward because this is actually going to be a 3-part series. So this is just part 1. Part 2 is regime change. That's already out for edit. And now with this new evidence, it's going to be part 3, and I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. But so I go down there to release the documentary, and I'm lined up with interviews from whistleblowers that want to come speak to me because their media is all bought and paid for by USAID. The social media, even they have political, they call them polytalkers there. And they're like the younger generation that USAID employs and recruits in to just basically sit there on TikTok and Twitter all day and try to discredit people like me and you. But the citizens of Guatemala are waking up and they're realizing it, but they can't really trust anybody to go to this information. Definitely nobody with a big enough voice to get it out to the masses. So when I decided that I was going to come down there, a lot of these people started coming forward. One of the first people I met with, I can't reveal their identity, but they brought me a thumb drive. And on that thumb drive is some pretty damning information. We can get into it if you want, or we can I can land it there for a second.
Well, I'm going to land it there because I just want to, remind everybody real quick how big this USAID scandal is. USAID has been off the American taxpayers, been funding debauchery around the world now for decades, including Sidney Powell just posted, and I could go through my X feed and show you all this stuff, but let's just give you the highlights. President Trump right here talking about USAID, all the billions of dollars. You said fake news agencies all over the world. It's not just here. It is all over the world. Fake news agencies have been paid off for their, quotes, good stories. And then he calls out Politico, taking $8 million. He wants to know if the New York Times, of course we know they took it. They all took the money. That's even been, it's been shown that they were, supposed to be providing disinformation campaigns and basically refuting social media posts from people like you, me, Liz, and many others who were spouting the truth with evidence, but they were calling us crazy. And this is, this has been a giant psyop. And now we know from Sidney Powell that USAID was also funding Smartmatic and overthrowing elections around the world, color revolutions, as they call it, right? So let
me add to that, Ann, because so when we talk about regime changes in USAID in these countries, a lot of people are hearing about USAID for the first time, but USAID has been operating since the 60s. They turned El Salvador into the deadliest country in the world. They're in the process of overthrowing the Guatemalan government as we speak. And how that process works is USAID will go in and they'll, under the disguise of humanitarian aid, we're going to help you, Guatemala. We're going to help these organizations that are pro-democracy when really they build out a network of NGOs, and it's NGO in front of NGO in front of NGO in front of NGO. And these NGOs are literally front organizations for the CIA, the State Department, and USAID. That way, USAID can control the agenda from their perch. There's only normally 2 or 3 employees from USAID actually controlling this entire point of this operation. And they use NGO and NGO and NGO and NGO like you would do with a money laundering and offshore bank accounts, right? You want to go from country to country to country to country, so that way it's hard to track that trail. When they commit crimes, they go from NGO that hires NGO that hires NGO that hires NGO that commits the crime, right? That way USAID is almost always untouchable, and you're never able to trace all the money back. And this person doesn't know that USAID's calling the shots. They just know that this NGO is, and this NGO knows that this NGO is. And then they use what the National Endowment for Democracy. This is one NGO that everybody should be laser focused on. I'm sure you've heard of it a ton of times.
Mel K, I give her a shout out. Mel K was calling out NED back in 2019 when we were doing shows together.
No way. That I got to chat with Mel K for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and she just brought me on yesterday to talk about the same thing.
Right.
Wow, talk about a wealth of knowledge, right?
Yeah,
so
unbelievable.
NED acts as like what I would call as the recruiting arm, like a staffing agency, almost like for USAID in these regime change operations. They'll post job postings, and they're looking for like a Guatemalan national that fits all of this criteria, right? Good looking, well articulated, college degree. He checks all these boxes, and they basically bring this person in, and then they either blackmail them, they bribe them, or they're just straight up corrupt and they want power and they want the position. They're willing to do the bidding anyways. Yeah. Then they look for media outlets that are failing. And they say, hey, you know what? We see that you're a failing media outlet, but we're willing to make these donations like they're making to Politico, right? But under the context that you're going to take this person as your primetime news slot. And then they fill out the media company. And then once they have control of the media company, they do what with it? They use it to attack any politicians that won't do their bidding. And they amplify the voices of the politicians that will. And over a 10, 20, 30-year period, they've taken over your Supreme Court. They've taken over a majority of Congress. They've Just now in Guatemala in 2023, they rigged the Guatemalan election. They just installed the president. And then they used that media outlet and every media outlet in Guatemala to attack anybody who spoke out about the election fraud with their, election denier, misinformation spreader, domestic terrorist, they're anti-freedom, anti-democracy, all of the key talking points that we basically got hit with in 2020, the Guatemalan citizens are getting hit with today. And then they also use these organizations because now think over a 20-year period, how many NGOs I had hired a guy named Randall Land on X to do a private investigation. He's a private investigator firm. I had him track every penny that our government has sent to Guatemala over the last 4 years, and it's $797 million. Our government has given to Guatemala, and this is money, America. People, you guys need to understand that nobody's auditing this. Nobody's looking for this money. Nobody's wondering if somebody bought something for $15,000, it should have cost $10. It doesn't matter. Nobody's looking for this money. And this money is what they use to do things like stage color revolutions. And what I mean when I say stage color revolutions, it's just like January 6th, when we were just finding out what there was like thousands of feds in the crowd at January 6th. The same thing happened here in Guatemala. So after they rigged the election, they staged a 180-day protest outside of the Attorney General's office for 180 days. You're talking about a country where the average salary is probably $1.50 a day. These people work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and they can't afford to feed their family. These aren't the type of people that can go afford to stand out in the streets for 880 days straight, protesting, trying to get an attorney general removed from power because she's investigating the election fraud. That is right. U.S. aid funding these color revolutions, these stage rent-a riots, if you will. Then they took this rent-a riot from the attorney general's office for 180 days. They marched it down to her neighborhood. This would be the equivalent of people at January 6th, leaving January 6th with 1,000 people and going to Merrick Garland's neighborhood, kicking down the gate, terrorizing his neighborhood. Then they're live streaming. They go to the attorney general's home. They pull back the foliage and they film her address, showing the entire world where the attorney general's address is. Then the film cuts off. Then they go inside the attorney general's house. They ransack it and they piss and they shit all over her house.
Wow.
Could you imagine what they would have, think about that. If the January 6ers would have did that to Merrick Garland, what would have happened to those people?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, look, the FBI had 5,000 people dedicated to the January 6ers that were outside peacefully protesting, and how many people got flashbang doors kicked and no-knock warrants, and 1,570 went through the entire process, and they were still arresting people up until January 20th. That's how pathetic these people are. So I hate to say it, that boomerang is coming back around. And now that we have, citizen journalists all over the place that are unearthing all this information, there is nowhere for these people to hide. And every time we think we find the rabbit hole, we hit the bottom. No. 5 more rabbit holes pop up, and the bottom we never see the bottom. I mean, this is so deep and so diabolical. I want to zero in now. I want to land this plane onto a specific time period during when Barack Obama was president. He had a guy in president that was his U.S. ambassador to Guatemala, Todd Robinson. He was there from 2014 to 2017. Incidentally, the U.S. aid provided a lot of assistance to Guatemala during that time. And in 2016 alone, Guatemala received $132 million in what they call bilateral aid, increased to $145 million in the next fiscal year of 2017. And they went around into a bunch of, like you said, NGOs. And when you start to look at some of these NGOs and who the people were in there, they were people that were part of USAID prior to, and they've had relationships with other people. So it's just this club, like George Carlin says, and you ain't in it. So let's talk about this demon, shall we? The Todd Robinson guy, because I want you to kind of lay everybody on the rumor of the last name Robinson, potentially what the chatter is out there.
So the chatter on this man is that he was raping little boys in Guatemala. That's what he was being accused of by the citizens. If you search Todd Robinson Guatemala on X, you'll see photos of somebody took a banner, and there's like the bridges where all the cars go by. They went to the bridge and they threw the banner over the bridge, and somebody took a photo of it, and it talks about Todd Robinson and pedophilia. So this was always a rumor. And in 2017, there was a coup attempt that took place in Guatemala. They didn't really realize what the reasoning was behind it, but for some reason, basically, USAID and our State Department was hell-bent on removing the president, Jimmy Morales, from power. Well, I just got a thumb drive that kind of breaks this all down. And on this thumb drive, I got an internal document from what looks like, I would equate it to the, I don't know if you want to call it like their civil intelligence of Guatemala. So I would say that would be like our Secret Service or like the NSA or like the CIA. And this person, this general director, was ordered to do this report on Todd Robinson. So let me just kind of read this report to you and kind of break it down for you. So it says, by this means, I'm writing you for the purpose of informing you that I was charged of the investigation that was assigned to me on May 13th of 2017. So I produced to inform you the following. I was kind enough to carry out an investigation of Ambassador Todd Robinson, who continues in this position currently, to make a profile and collect general information about him and what he was assigned to do, or his pseudonymous name, which they call him the circus director. That was Todd Robinson's nickname, or the partying ambassador. And I'll just summarize it. This article goes on to basically say that Todd Robinson is a raging alcoholic. He throws Diddy style freak offs. These parties last 2 to 3 days, where he literally has little boys that are being delivered to these parties. These are young boys, 12, 13, 14 years old, from the cartels that he's basically in bed with. And at one of these parties, one of these 13-year-old boys was raped, and they bribed and paid off his mother with the mother supposedly had to flee to Costa Rica, and where she received a $5,000 cash allowance. Now, in this article, it also goes on at one of these Diddy freak-offs, where it goes on to say that Todd Robinson is basically a raging alcoholic. There's never a meeting with Todd Robinson where there's not alcohol involved. Anytime he's with any one of his 20 staff members and they're driving anywhere, anytime his phone rings, he forces them to pull the car over and makes all of his employees get outside the car and stand outside the car while he finishes his phone call. Then he also has two gay lovers. One of his gay boyfriends works at the embassy. The other one is a Guatemalan national. And at one of these Diddy-style freak-offs, Todd Robinson got so drunk that he took one of the security guard's guns from him and was shooting it into the air randomly. And when the security guard went to take his gun back, a struggle broke out. Todd Robinson shoots the security guard in the leg. And to this day, the security guard has never been seen or heard from again.
Oh, my God. It sounds like the chef at the Obama's place up in Martha's Vineyard.
Sounds a lot like it, doesn't it?
It's just crazy. Can we talk about the Obama connection, by the way, besides the fact that he was the ambassador, that other little rumor?
Yeah, so the person that gave me this said rumor is that Todd Robinson is actually Big Mike's cousin.
Michelle LaVaughn Robinson, or LaVaughn, or Michelle, Big Mike. Wow.
What's Michelle's last name?
Robinson.
Oh, that's the first time I'm hearing that. I didn't know that.
Well, no. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Big Mike. It was, Big Mike, Michael LaVaughn Robinson. Her name is Michelle LaVaughn Robinson. Michael LaVaughn. Excuse me. I'm getting myself all twisted. It's
last
Michael
name is
LaVaughn.
Robinson?
Michael LaVaughn. And if everybody's seen the pictures of Big Mike and Michael LaVaughn, Michelle and Michael LaVaughn, it's like they look like twins. Okay, just one has more hair than the other. Michael LaVaughn, and she's Michelle LaVaughn Obama. So I don't know.
I mean, you look at this
guy's
guy's
LaVaughn differently, but it's still LaVaughn. Okay, I'm just saying.
Well, pull back up his career there, Ann, and walk us through that. Look at this guy. He graduates from Georgetown University in 1985, and then he's immediately right into the State Department, where he's like next level. And we hear these stories about Obama and how Obama was basically groomed from the very, very beginning by the CIA. And you're talking about, if you're going to install Obama, you're not just grooming just him to put him into positions. You're looking for other key people that can fit the mold and you can install into these positions. So I just find that very strange that you were sending me some connections earlier about his history and other places that he worked. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I don't think I have those pulled up right now. Let me just see here. Okay. Let's see here.
It was the very first one that you put on the screen a second ago was the...
What did I put up? Sorry.
It was all of his job postings where he worked at. It was blue.
Oh, I'm sorry. That. Yeah. Okay. This one right here. Yeah, it's up there right now. You can't see it. There you go. Sorry.
Yes, this is the one. Yes.
Yep.
So you had connected a few dots of where he was, right? He was in Guatemala the first time in 05 and 08.
Yep.
And then he was other places. Then he became the ambassador in 07. And then the last place, right before Trump, he was only out of his position because Trump came into power. In 2021 to 2025, he's the assistant.
And nobody knows where he is right now. You can't find any information about where this guy's. There's no evidence of him still being in government at all. Well, I would hope not. But the trail goes dark with this guy.
So he's the assistant secretary of state for international narcotics and law enforcement affairs. So basically, the top drug narcotics enforcement dude, who's known for throwing Diddy-style freak-offs and
Right.
basically having his way with little boys, is now our international top cop. And I have no idea why we have a fentanyl crisis in America. I mean, you can't imagine why our drug epidemic's at the all-time high when this guy's at the helm of it.
No, no, it would make no sense for that at all. But then, when you consider that every single agency has the direct opposite effect of what its intended name is to be. In other words, like the Food and Drug Administration, right? Well, I guess they're pretty obvious. I mean, they're about food and drugs, but it's not real food and it's bad drugs. The CDC, Center for Disease and Corruption, I call it, or Crime and Corruption. Everything that they say they're going to do, the exact opposite happens, and it's by intent. It's by design. I mean, this is the fox guarding the hen house. So the fact that you have all these agencies, it's supposed to give the American people some kind of warm and fuzzy feeling that the government's here to protect you. The exact opposite is happening. I mean, let's go back to the Iran-Contra, right? The Iran-Contra, and it was what's his name? Tom Cruise did a fabulous movie about it, American Made, and he basically told the whole story. There's been so many stories told about this, even adrenochrome, Death Becomes Her with Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn. They were all about trying to stay young, and they found the youth juice, this little bright red vial of youth juice. Yep. They were telling us about adrenochrome back then, but we didn't know what it was. You know what I mean? We thought it was a great, funny movie with Bruce Willis. They're all demons, and they were all taking it. So,
and the craziest part about this is not only did I get that information, Ann, I got Todd Robinson's offshore bank accounts. This man, right, while ambassador, right, has offshore bank accounts with up to $3 million in them. How does a man that has been a State Department employee his entire life, maybe making $50,000 to $100,000 a year, maybe $200,000 a year in his recent position, have these bank accounts where he's moving such large sums of money? You'll see, look at beginning balance, $531,000, local transfer, $43,500, internal transfer, $85,000, ending balance, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds until you'll see some points where here it's up to 3 million at its peak. And then I think it goes down to, and you'll see times where they with cash withdrawals, $40,000. What are you withdrawing $40,000 cash for? Who are you paying? Where'd you spend that money at? And,
right,
you can see it. You start there in 17. He was still ambassador in 17, right? He goes all the way back to 16 as well. And it's like, okay, like we understood how how the Democrats would steal our tax dollars and they would give it to USAID. USAID would give it to an NGO. The NGO would give it to an NGO, and that NGO is donating to the Democratic Party. Their campaign coffers are stacked to the ceiling. I got how that money came back in. But I didn't understand how these unelected bureaucrats were getting paid, right? I thought maybe the money was coming from the cartels, or maybe it's actually going directly into their offshore bank accounts. And I think that if you start cross-referencing all of these banks where this man has all of this money, I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see some that align with the Biden money laundering scheme. We already know where their offshore bank accounts are. How many are matching? And then if you start to see that and you start to go through all of these top high-level officials, anybody that had gotten an award from Anthony Blinken in the last 4 years should be the first place that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel start to investigate. I mean, look at this, Ann. Is that not insane? Switzerland, Cayman Islands, Bahamas.
I know. And there's a reason these are tax havens, right? There's a reason. It's because, these people, the demons in our government, are not keeping their money inside the jurisdiction of the United States. They're taking it outside, and they're hiding it, and they're doing it in bank accounts and in countries that will protect them because they don't want this information out. I'd like to know, and I know you don't want to give up your source, but can you tell us maybe the background of your source? Were they a government employee in Guatemala, or were they a government employee of the United States? And anything that we can get just to kind of understand how they were able to get their hands on this kind of information, because this is explosive.
They were one of us. They were a victim of it. They were crushed by the corrupt government. And they were crushed worse than any, picture what was done to the January 6ers, times that by 10 over a very long period of time. They had their absolute life destroyed. So in the process of having their life destroyed, there were so many people on the inside that just felt bad. And each person gave them a little bit of piece of evidence, and they've been collecting and building this evidence for a very long time now. And finally found somebody, which was me, that they thought that they could trust and give this information to. And they've already sent it to what I think is our Justice Department. I think that's what that one letter I sent you to the Justice Department. So supposedly this had been given to our, Merrick Garland at one point probably, but obviously that didn't go
nowhere.
Yeah.
Oh my God, look at this. I mean, I'm still scrolling since we've been, it's nonstop scrolling. Look at these transfers and withdrawals. It is incredible.
What do you think he was doing? I mean, what are these, I want to know where this money came from. I want to know, is Kash Patel going to investigate? Is Pam Bondi going to go, let's go? Or is Mark Rubio? This is your department, Rubio. Rubio, he used to be a State Department employee. You should be the one that's going, wait. We had no idea this was going on. Anything we can do to help Kash Patel and Pam Bondi investigate these clowns right here, it needs to happen. But the question people should ask themselves is, why was Rubio leading a coalition charge with senators, both Republican and Democrats, to sign a letter and send it to the Attorney General demanding that she drop the investigation into the election fraud that was taking place in Guatemala?
Right.
Then I've also sent you other things, which are the bank accounts, offshore bank accounts of Thelma Aldana.
Who is this lady? Thelma Aldana Hernandez. I've got a little
Thelma
document
Aldana was the Attorney General of Guatemala. She was installed by our government. She was handpicked, I believe, by Hillary Clinton and promoted by Hillary Clinton when she got the position. So Thelma Aldana is the Attorney General of Guatemala. So at the time, she's probably making a $30,000 to $40,000 a year salary, right? She is now a fugitive on the run from Guatemala. Just during the Harris campaign, she was seen in the White House doing photo ops with Maria Torres, which is one of our representatives here in Congress. She's protected by the State Department. And she has a warrant out for arrest in Guatemala right now for all of these crimes that we're discussing. And that was prior to me giving them her offshore bank accounts. I could only imagine how eager they are to speak to her. And I'm very interested to see if Trump's going to continue to protect these criminals. And here you go again. Here's more offshore bank accounts of Thelma Aldana. It's not just Thelma Aldana. There are all these other key players that are in Guatemala. Some of them I don't know. I know quite a bit about Thelma Aldana. These other ones that you'll eventually start getting into as well. I don't know exactly what role all these people play, but I had a little thing typed up for you that maybe you can share it with your audience later, or we can get into it right now if you wanted to pull it up on screen. But I'd be reciting exactly from this script that I pretty much wrote here.
Okay, let me see if I can pull that up. I don't remember you sending me this.
I might have it. I might actually have it right here.
And you can use the screen share.
So Thelma Aldana.
Is this it? Is this it right here?
It says Thelma Aldana Hernandez. It's a Word document.
Vetted by CIC.
Yep. So that's the CCG, was that anti-corruption task force that got created in Guatemala when our government basically first had it. So this Thelma Aldana was running for she was doing something in the Supreme Court, and for some reason she ticked somebody off. So the CCG actually started to investigate her, and they did an investigation, and they took her. You need like a certification to run for the Supreme Court saying you're not corrupt. They took hers away, and then somebody came back and said, put that back in play. We obviously, if she's corrupt, we want her to be in that position because then we can use her to blackmail her. So they give her back this thing, and then she goes all the way to become the president of the Supreme Court by 2011. So in 2010, she was so corrupt that the CCG wanted to take her privileges away from being in the Supreme Court to now getting promoted to literally the president of the Supreme Court in 2011 until 2012. Then she was replaced by Pazzi Paz. But in 2016, she was recognized with an International Woman of Courage Award by Secretary of State.
You mean like the Medal of Freedoms that Joe Biden gave those losers? Right. Okay. Same thing.
In 2019, she entered the presidential election under the Samia Party, and she's now a fugitive living in the U.S. seeking political asylum under the Biden-Harris administration.
Well, that's not going to work out too well. I hope she's left the country for her sake, unless she's just waiting for ICE to pick her up.
Oh, boy. This is going to get interesting. Then you have Juan Francisco Sandalvez. He's a Guatemalan attorney. He's a prosecutor that served as head of special prosecutor's office against impunity from September of 2015 to July of 2021. He was recognized by Anthony Blinken with an anti-corruption champion award in July 25th of 2021. And he's now a fugitive Guatemalan, and he lives in D.C. under the protection of the Biden-Harris administration.
Do they still get protection right now? I mean,
I really hope so, because I hope there's somewhere that Trump can get his hands on them.
But I mean, were they given U.S. citizenship so that Biden could pardon them? I mean, like, I don't understand. Even though they can't get used, there's no such thing as a pardon.
Biden can only pardon them in America. He can't pardon them in Guatemala. So if we have an extradition treaty with them, I believe that we should be able to deport them and send them right back to Guatemala. So now you have Erica Afin Davila, and she's a former judge in Guatemala. She received in 2021 a public resignation by the U.S. State Department and Anthony Blinken. In 2022, he gave her the position as high judge and she went into U.S. protection. On May of 2023, the first arrest warrant was emitted against her.
You know what I'm thinking? You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that these are all the people that were involved in the child trafficking of these Guatemalan children that quotes went missing.
Of
And
course.
they know, and that's, all these payoffs, all this money, the money laundering through the State Department and NGOs and US aid and NGOs is how they got paid to move these kids, these children around the world, but into our country. And they're seeking refuge now in the United States. Well, they were, at least under the Biden-Harris administration. I'm just really hoping that we round these people up and they end up in Gitmo with some of the other, illegals that are in our country.
I hope honestly that they end up in one of these Guatemalan prisons. Like, you think the DC Gulag is bad? Take a look at what these Guatemalan prisons look like when you get one sometime, either there or, Trump just made this deal with President Bukele of El Salvador, and he's going to be taking prisoners for the United States. So I wouldn't mind sending these folks to one of these prisons down here in El Salvador, because these are the real deal. I know our prisons are pretty bad in America, but these dudes are the real freaking deal. Check that out. How'd you like to be stuck in that for 24 hours a day in solitary confinement with all those dudes?
Well, it's not exactly solitary. They're just literally bunched in there like rats. Look at that. That's just nasty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's bad. I have to say it's probably worse than the DC Gulag just by that picture alone.
Mm-hmm. It's no joke there in Guatemala, and they're cockroach infested too.
Wow, that's crazy.
So you're right, and these are the key people, right, that were involved in all of this. This is a long 10-year plan where in 2015, Thelma Aldana was she removed Ortez from one of the presidents, from a sitting president, was removed from power 3 weeks before his term ended by Thelma Aldana. And then you have Andrea Vladimir Gonzalez, and she's a former prosecutor of the Special Prosecutor's Office Against Impunity. She received special treatment, or he received special treatment from the CSIG, and its full support, specifically in 2019, right before it was completely dismantled. And then on 2019, he was after Sandra Torres to try to get her out of the general election. So this woman was running for president. He wanted to get her out of position, so he used the weaponized CSIG to go after her. And then you have Rudy Milano Hernana. He's a former prosecutor of the Special Prosecutor's Office Against Impunity. He's also, guess what, a fugitive from Guatemala justice. Asked the U.S. for his protection for him and his family as well.
Wow, this is incredible. So all the dirtbags that had money getting laundered into their bank accounts were probably the same dirtbags that were involved in all of the child trafficking.
100%, because you think about that, Ann. You know more about what happened in Haiti and the Clintons than I do. I just know that, what's her name?
Laura Silsby.
Laura Silsby tried to traffic 40 children out of Haiti twice with the protection of our State Department, with the money and backing of the Clinton Foundation, with all the resources she had.
Yeah, 40. Of course. The Clintons went and got her out, and she was arrested for trying to do it the first time.
Twice. So think about that. She couldn't get 80 kids out of Haiti, which is a lot less secure and a lot more corrupt than Guatemala. And somehow in Guatemala, over a 4-year period, 190,052 migrant children have been kidnapped and trafficked out of that country, or at the very least, exported out of that country. And they made it into America, where you couldn't do that unless you were paying off and you had full control of every operational port. The military would have to be involved, government officials from the very, very top upper echelons all the way down to the very bottom. And that's the only way you can move that many children out of a country over a 4-year period without getting caught.
Yeah, it's just so disgusting. It's so disgusting. I want you to talk to me a little bit about, some of the concerns, because we're starting to get the reports now, south the border, particularly outside Arizona, where they're finding children in tunnels where they've actually been keeping these children and using them for adrenochrome harvesting, as well as organ harvesting, and of course sex trade as well. But I mean, it's starting to make it up into not just social media folklore, but it's starting to be more pervasive. And, that's how these things are. They got to test the waters, so it's been percolating out here for a long time. Have you seen any evidence of that in Guatemala, or heard of any evidence of that with these kids? Once they were abused, they were used for organ harvesting and or adrenochrome harvesting?
No, I haven't, honestly, Ann. I have not heard much about the organ harvesting or the adrenochroming of these children, because I've been so focused on what's here right now that I can prove. And I know that these people that are trafficking these children are the same people that are involved in the organ harvesting and the adrenochroming. It all goes in. I think it's 6% of children are kidnapped specifically for organ harvesting are specifically kidnapped for child ritual sacrifice. And then I think it's like 12% are for organ harvesting, like 45% are for sex, and the other 45% are for labor or whatever it is. So it makes up a good portion of it. But every time I talk about it, I feel like it pushes more people away from, that's when the blinders come up. And I can't talk about it, I can't hear it. But I try to go down the rabbit hole sometimes, but if you can, and we can if you'd like to, but I don't know much about the organ harvesting or adrenochroming or the sacrificing. I know the last person that we interviewed was Baz, and Baz said that he rescued a girl from a satanic ritual cult where she had been basically brought into this cult by her grandfather, and she was raped repeatedly by her grandfather and his friends. And, Baz asked her, well, like, what was it like when these men were just, raping you? And she goes, honestly, I was so used to my grandfather doing it. I just thought it was normal. And she was forced to, or ordered to sacrifice a child. And Baz asked, how'd you do it? And she said, a knife right through the heart. That they laid the kid on a table and she just knife right through the heart of this poor kid. And that was normal. And she said it like it was it was just something she did. It was normal. Like it didn't faze her when she recited it.
Isn't that just amazing? And we've heard that. I mean, there's been, videos of kids all around the world. There's two brother and sister jump out in my mind of the two in UK that were very involved in that. And they were, people when they first saw it, they're like, oh, this is just more, internet folklore. No, unfortunately it's not. And if you talk to people like Kathy O'Brien, who's also an SRA MK Ultra survivor, she's written many, many books. In fact, I have one of them sitting right here on my desk, PTSD, A Time to Heal. She's, I've been giving these books out to J6ers as I meet them, and she's lovely. She signed them all, Peace and Freedom from Kathy. But there is hope for people that have survived this. Some of the more disgusting stories I've been unfortunately provided, I don't want to say privilege because it's not a privilege to hear this stuff. It's just horrible. Is, some of the children, they are dismembered so they can't fight back. And that's for sick people that just want to, take advantage of a child in a position of inability to fight back. And I don't know how you return your child to a parent if you recover a child like that to the parent. What do you return?
That's the second time I've heard that today. And I was just on another show where a guy was telling me that they call this guy they call him the butcher. But let me say something first before I forget it. Is those kids that you speak about? I think a lot of people have seen that video, and I want people to understand. You pay attention to how these kids say these things, and they're kids, right? So they're reciting like what's right on the top of their mind, and they're saying things right to the T without thinking. They're not looking at each other. Brother and sister, they're right next to each other. They're finishing each other's sentences. They don't have to look because they both experience the exact same thing. So you can almost be damn sure that those kids are telling you the truth when they're speaking just by watching their body language. Now back to this guy. Supposedly there are guys out there called the Butcher, and he delivers these children to this elite network of pedophiles, and he dismembers them, both arms and legs. And then he cauterizes after he removes the arms and the limbs, he cauterizes them. He also pulls out their teeth. And then these kids are basically delivered to this elite network of pedophiles that can have their way with these kids that can't fight back.
It's sick.
And I could go into detail about, sewing eyes shut. It's so dark and demonic that it's the most evil things that you can think of are being done to these children. We got stories of, a 5-year-old girl chained into a basement where she's raped 10 times a day. And the guy that owns her throws her food on the floor every night before he rapes her. And after he's done, he smokes a cigarette. He puts the cigarette butt out on her arm just in case she escapes. He wants her to look down and see all the scars of all the cigarette burns on his arm. So no matter how old she gets or when she grows up, she's going to constantly be reminded every time she looks down at her arm of all those cigarette butt burns and remind how she was savagely raped by this piece of shit.
It's just so disgusting, Ryan. Well, I got to tell you, man, you are super brave to go down there. Did anybody go with you? Did you have a backup person? Did you have, what was your protection?
No, I normally roll solo because the whistleblowers, they're very skittish and they don't trust many people. So I find that I'm able to get in and actually convince people to come and sit down and talk with me, more so when I'm by myself. But I did have proper security provided by the Attorney General's office. I didn't go anywhere without an armed guard that escorted me everywhere I went. I did leave.
The AG of Guatemala or the AG of you? Who's AG?
Guatemala. Our government would throw me to the wolves. I had to fly into El Salvador and to release this information because I felt like if I tried to fly into America with it, I would get arrested and they would plant drugs on me or frame me at the airport. Right. Yep. I was flying into the safest country that I know of, and then where I feel the most safe to speak the truth, and that is El Salvador. And
isn't that sad?
let me tell your audience too, I went from El Salvador being the safest country in the world, and 2.5 years ago, this was the most deadliest country in the world, to going into Guatemala, where our government is absolutely destroying them. And it's so dark and like just, it feels weird in Guatemala. It's so negative because everybody you walk by has their head down, they're keeping to themselves, they're closed off, and they don't want to say hi. They just want to get from point A to point B alive. And that's all they're worried about. Here in El Salvador, every person you walk by is buenos dias, buenas tardes, hi, they're happy to see you, they're chatty. It's like this country is full of life. And how did Bukele do that? Over a 2.5 year period, he went from being the deadliest country in Latin America to the safest country in the world by kicking USA the F out of his country and ordering an investigation into every single member of his cabinet, including himself. And that's what right. Trump needs to order an investigation into. Even Mark Rubio, you want to be in Trump's cabinet? Great. Full investigation. Trump should put together in a task force of people like maybe Kyle Seraphin and these elite FBI, Garrett O'Boyle, the people that have been crushed, the January 6ers, and let them do a full investigation into these politicians. Give them all the resources. They should have no more resources than were used against the January 6ers. So whatever resources were used against the January 6ers, this investigative task force should have. They should have FISA warrants, all of them signed, whether they're legit or not, and let them tear into these people. Let's find out who has offshore bank accounts. Let's get to the bottom of this, because we can't do this for 4 years and arrest a handful of people that every one of our politicians is basically corrupt and rotted to the core at some point or another.
That's a fact. That is a fact. And, it's interesting. Vivek Ramaswamy was part of the Doge team. He's not. He's now running for, I guess, governor of Ohio. But there was some sort of a kerfuffle that became evident. And I think it was literally he was asked to go and do something else, right? So they, politically expediently put him on a different trajectory and have just let Elon run with Doge. So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. I think, what we're doing at American Made Foundation is we consider ourselves the People's Department of Government Accountability. We're going to be very focused on right now North Carolina and the Child CPS, the DSS, Department of Social Services, which is basically a subchapter of CPS federally, nationally. And we're going to expose the heck out of that because they have, Ryan, literally destroyed families that already were destroyed from Hurricane Helene. The family was still intact, but everything they had is gone. And now CPS is coming and saying, oh, this is not a suitable, facility for your family to be in, so we're taking the kids. That shit's not going to fly anymore. I mean, it just isn't. And so we've got some great people that we're working with that are ready to go and testify, and we're going to just bring this forward and let the chips fall where they may. But, that's another agency that's got to go. So
well, I'm going to be flying out to do a sit-down interview with you, Ann, because that is the number one request I'm getting right now is to get a documentary out there on CPS and these scumbags inside of our own government. And I'm traveling all over the world, and all these kids around the world, but it's time to start saving our American children. So after I get back in May, I'm going to be going full send right into that documentary. So hopefully you'll have time to come and sit down with me. And if anybody watches my documentary today, if you guys could please do me a huge favor and just go onto X at Ryan Madden Media and drop those comments down there. It's the top tweet. It's pinned right at the top of my profile. X has a scorecard. So everything you do on X is graded. A like is worth 1 point. A retweet's worth 2. A quote tweet's worth 3. A bookmark's worth 5. A comment is worth 27. And a reply to a comment is worth 151 points. So if you could just go down there, even if you can't watch the whole thing or you don't like it, just go in there, drop some of those comments below, and then try to even have a conversation. Ask me a question. I'm getting ready to head to the airport right now and be flying out to do a Tim Pool's podcast tomorrow morning. And I'll have a lot of time in these travels to go through all those comments. USA.
Hey, I'm going to play this real quick. Stick with me because I want the audience to hear this.
It was U.S. aid that I fear much more than the CIA, because the U.S. aid is how CIA gets shit done.
USAID is clearly in the job of trying to bring about regime change. It has secret bank accounts, shell companies.
USAID gets $50 billion a year in U.S. taxpayer money. That's a larger overt fund than the CIA has.
USAID perhaps is the new CIA.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably.
This is not just about over there. This is about here.
They have a process, a system by which they destroy other nations. And they use that same process and system in order to destroy the United States.
It's a plot against our own people.
America, What if I told you that the United States government was acting like the world's Gestapo, using organizations like USAID under the pretense of humanitarian aid to topple governments, install politicians, and orchestrate regime changes in third world countries?
I disagree with that as somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat. Yeah. Not here, but, other places.
These are places that are practically entirely run at this point by the CIA and the U.S. State Department, which is, of course, a CIA front.
USAID provides most of the money.
This isn't a giveaway.
The State Department provides the policy vision.
This makes a difference to people's perception of us. Tricky endeavors, whether it's fighting terrorism,
Al-Shabaab groups in USAID camps,
or narcotics.
Joe Biden's State Department is commanding the Taliban to keep the opium flowing.
Or oppression or resistance to governance.
Those USAID trucks were stopped at the border to Venezuela with fully automatic weapons.
All of those things.
I don't think that's humanitarian aid.
What a difference that makes.
And if we stand for democracy anywhere, we have to stand for it everywhere, including in Guatemala.
Guatemala. What if I told you that USAID, the State Department, and the CIA created a fraudulent political party and then used that illegitimate party to rig the 2023 Guatemalan election so they could install a list of CIA-controlled politicians who would continue to allow them to run the world's largest child trafficking network out of Guatemala?
Nothing to do with that. Correlation, not causation. That is absurd.
They didn't deny it, which means that they admitted it.
This is no question, a political shocker in Guatemala.
The U.S. government, the Biden administration, helped cover up voter fraud.
Why Guatemala? Why not some other country?
Guatemala is concerned about child trafficking, the NGOs that are trafficking the children.
Jill Biden was the chairman of the board of Save the Children.
You guys just raided Save the Children.
Guess who stepped in? The State Department, U.S. Embassy, and USAID. Another coincidence?
America. What if I told you that DHS, under the direct orders of Alejandro Mayorkas, would create a public-private partnership with Mexican cartels, and that HHS, under the direct orders of Xavier Becerra, would create a public-private partnership with NGOs like Save the Children and Southwest Key Programs. And in this quasi-public-private partnership, they would use your tax dollars to fund the world's largest international child trafficking operation.
As to whom we know where they are, that is outside the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security.
This is nothing but lies. Nothing but lies.
Secretary Mayorkas, he acts like none of this ever happens.
It's his policies that caused over 500,000 children being smuggled in this country.
And he also knew who to blame. HHS places those children.
That's on you.
Was that a question to me?
Are you familiar with the sponsors that utilize a strip club as an address? You shrug your shoulders and then send another batch of kids out to sponsor.
Human trafficking bust at an egg farm. Federal prosecutors call it modern-day slavery.
Of course, we investigate cases of trafficking.
Another lie.
Ryan, just incredible. I mean, just really, really, really incredible. That your work is so fabulous. I just love your style. I love the way you present the information. It's so edgy, and I could sit here and watch it for the next, 10 hours. I just want it to keep coming because it's everything we know, but you managed to compile all of it into a documentary, which people really, really, really need to see. If they want to understand where the money is going, if they care about children at all, if they just care about their own self-worth, because, we're funding this garbage, you've got to watch this movie. Seriously.
God bless you, Ann. Thank you so much for having me on. It's, you're the first person when I got that story. I was like, I'm going to text Ann. I know she'll bring me on. So thank you for bringing me in and let me break this information on your show. I really, really appreciate it.
Ryan, you're amazing. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And please, holler at me when you get back. If you're flying through Florida, I'd love to see you.
All right. Sounds good, Ann. Love you. Bye.
Okay, love you too, honey. Bye. Wow. Folks, Ryan Matta, he is definitely one to watch. The first time I started to see the work he was producing with his style of documentary production, it is just gripping. Every single minute, you're constantly on the edge of your seat. What's next? What's next? And it's not just, he's just not telling the story. He's actually bringing the evidence and bringing the receipts. And he's using their words. These demons' words. Ali Mayorkas, what a piece of garbage that guy is. He is literally Satan. That guy is Satan. Same with Joe Biden. Same with Jill Biden. Same with Blinken. They're all criminals. They're all corrupt. And they're all very heavily engaged in child sacrifice and child trafficking. And they know it. They know exactly what's going on because they're the ones facilitating and quarterbacking it. And they're using your money to do it. How does that make you feel? I know it makes me feel like I need to take a shower. listen, American Made Foundation is hot on the trail on a lot of things. We're going to be bringing you some very, very big stories where we've just hired a publicist, Maureen Steele, and myself, another gentleman. We have an attorney on our board, Chris Burns. We are going to be bringing out information that is going to be of very, very high importance to the American public. We're going to be talking about CPS, and we're going to be talking about land patents and the corrupt court system. We're going to talk about the fact that you actually don't own your land. And when we break this down for you and show you just how they have literally turned you and me into chattel and monetized our land out from underneath our feet, you're going to have, well, talk about heads exploding. We like to say we're blowing the Democrats' heads up. Well, we're going to blow all our own heads up because it's so frustrating what's going on. But we can fix this because, again, it comes back down to who's the government? We are. We the people. What we have in Washington, D.C., what you have in your governors, in your state, it's all corporate, down to the municipal level. Every single aspect of our living condition has been corporatized, from your town to your county to the state to the federal government. And we're going to show you how BlackRock and how all these companies are able to monetize this stuff, and you really don't own anything. So forget Klaus Schwab, own nothing and be happy. No, we're going to get back to where we own the dirt under our feet, and we don't have to call somebody and get a permit to drill a well or to add an addition onto our house. When you when you have a Lloydal title, that gives you the right to go ahead and access what is beneath your feet. It's not just transacting on top of that patch of dirt that you believe you own. There's so much we're going to unpack, and it's going to be quite riveting because we're going to get everybody. If all of this information that President Trump and Doge and all of you are now finally getting traction and attention, and the rest of the people in America are waking up, we're going to contribute to this bonfire as we burn down the corporation and we restore and rise back up the Republic of the United States of America. God bless you all. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time on Steel News. Good day.